when Nora Bennett's husband, Ethan, told her over the phone, "Come get your daughter. I'm done carrying her." He expected her mother to beg, argue, or quietly accept the humiliation. But instead, Nora's mother simply replied, "You'll understand everything soon enough," before ending the call. And less than an hour later, a convoy of dark luxury vehicles arrived outside their elegant home in Charleston, South Carolina, while Ethan stood on the porch holding divorce documents and watching his confidence disappear, as Nora's supposedly ordinary parents stepped out surrounded by attorneys, executives, and security professionals. For years, Nora had deliberately kept her family's extraordinary wealth and influence separate from her marriage because she wanted Ethan to love her for herself rather than for the fortune attached to her last name. And she had built a modest career as a community financial counselor, driven an aging sedan, rented no extravagant properties, and lived quietly despite knowing that her family owned a major shipping and technology empire that stretched from the American Southeast to several international markets. Nora and Ethan had once met while volunteering after a hurricane devastated several coastal communities, and she had fallen for the compassionate man who spent an entire weekend repairing damaged homes, making jokes with exhausted volunteers, and promising that one day he wanted a peaceful life where success meant being proud of the person he saw in the mirror. But after Ethan received a lucrative position at a rapidly growing investment firm, his definition of success slowly changed until he began judging their marriage by income, social connections, expensive vacations, and the people they could impress at private events. He started criticizing Nora's career as small, complaining that she dressed too simply, questioning why she refused to use her family's connections, and eventually telling her during an argument, "I married a woman I thought would become extraordinary," to which she calmly replied, "I was extraordinary before you ever decided I needed to prove it." Yet, despite years of trying to save the relationship through patience, counseling, and compromise, Nora finally realized that Ethan no longer wanted a partner who understood him. He wanted a wife who could increase his status. The final break came when Ethan secretly moved money from their joint account, hired an aggressive attorney, and announced that he wanted the marriage terminated immediately, claiming that Nora had contributed too little financially and that her modest lifestyle embarrassed him among his colleagues. But what he did not know was that Nora had already discovered documents showing that he had been preparing to transfer several jointly purchased assets into a private company controlled by one of his friends. And rather than expose him publicly, she quietly collected the evidence, signed the divorce papers, and walked away with nothing except her personal belongings because she had finally stopped confusing financial sacrifice with love. When Ethan later called Nora's mother and arrogantly demanded that she come collect the daughter who had become useless, he expected an argument, but Nora's mother, Evelyn Bennett, merely answered, "You should be careful about calling someone useless when you have never bothered to understand what she has accomplished." And within minutes, the family convoy arrived, not to threaten Ethan, but because Evelyn had scheduled a meeting that morning with the board of the company Ethan worked for. The revelation stunned Ethan when he discovered that his employer was negotiating a major merger with Bennett Maritime Group, the company founded by Nora's grandfather and now managed by her parents, because the executive he had spent years trying desperately to impress was actually sitting beside Nora's father as his closest business advisor, and the board members quickly learned about Ethan's recent financial misconduct through documents already gathered during the divorce proceedings. Instead of using their influence to destroy him, Nora's father made one decision that surprised everyone. His personal choices are his responsibility, but our company will judge his professional performance fairly. And Ethan was allowed to remain employed while an independent investigation reviewed his conduct. Yet within months, the investigation revealed that his obsession with appearances had caused employees to leave, clients to complain, and colleagues to lose confidence in his leadership, proving that Nora's family never needed to punish him because the consequences of his own character were already catching up with him. Meanwhile, Nora returned to the work she had always loved and transformed her painful experience into something useful by establishing a nonprofit program called Second Horizon, which provided financial education, temporary housing assistance, career training, and legal resources for people rebuilding their lives after destructive relationships. And as the organization expanded across coastal communities, Nora discovered that the woman she had been during her marriage was slowly disappearing, not because she had become harder, but because she had finally learned that kindness did not require self erasure and forgiveness did not require returning to the person who had hurt her. Nearly 2 years later, Ethan unexpectedly contacted her with a message that contained no request for money, reconciliation, or professional help, only an admission that he had spent years believing admiration was the same thing as respect. And when Nora eventually agreed to meet him at a quiet bookstore cafe, he looked nothing like the ambitious man who once measured everyone by their possessions, as he told her. I blamed you for not being enough because admitting I was unhappy with myself was harder. And Nora answered, I hope you become someone you can respect, but that journey no longer belongs to me. 3 years after the divorce, Nora stood inside a crowded community center watching hundreds of families receive assistance through Second Horizon. And when she noticed Ethan volunteering at the food distribution table, quietly carrying boxes and listening patiently to an elderly couple, she realized that their story had finally reached the only ending that mattered. Not reconciliation, not revenge, and not watching someone lose everything, but two people becoming honest enough to stop hurting themselves and others because of the lives they once imagined they were supposed to have. Nora later married Daniel Reed, a patient high school history teacher who admired her compassion rather than her family name, and together they continued supporting the organization while Evelyn and her husband gradually stepped back from their business empire. And whenever Nora was asked about the day her wealthy family arrived at her former home, she always gave the same answer. That convoy didn't save me. It only reminded everyone else that I never needed saving. Because the real rescue happened when I finally understood that another person's inability to recognize my worth could never determine it. So if you have ever been made to feel insignificant, remember that your value does not depend on someone's approval, wealth, status, or decision to stay. And please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.